In this video, we're going to be talking about combining rational expressions using the least common denominators method. And to do this, we're going to work on an example together. So what we're going to be trying to do is get our fractions so they all have a common denominator, so that way we can actually do the subtraction and the addition to combine our rational expressions. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at our denominators, and we see that they do not match in our problem here. And again, our problem is 4 divided by x minus x plus 5 divided by x squared minus 4 plus 4 divided by x plus 2. So the next thing we want to do is we want to decide, can we reduce any of these fractions? And we can't reduce our first denominator. But if we take a look at our second denominator, we can see that we can actually factor that. So we're going to want to factor that. And we're going to factor that into an x plus 2 and an x minus 2. Let me do that in a different color. Alright, there we go. So we get x plus 2, x minus 2. And if I look over here at my third denominator, I see that that actually matches part of my second denominator. So we don't need to worry about doing anything there. So if we're going to get a common denominator, the first thing we want to do is we want to take a look at this first denominator and decide what is it missing that the others have. Well, clearly, the other two denominators have an x plus 2. So we're going to want to multiply both the denominator and the numerator by x plus 2. But we see that the second denominator has an x minus 2, and the first fraction doesn't have that. So we're going to multiply our second fraction by x minus 2 as well. Then we're going to look at our second fraction, and we're going to see that our second fraction is actually missing just that plain x from our first denominator. And if we look at our third fraction, we see that its denominator is missing not only that plain x from the first, but it's also missing that x minus 2 from the second fraction. So now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to multiply all of our pieces together, okay? So what I'm saying is we're going to want to multiply all of these and turn them into something. We're going to multiply all of this and turn it into something. And we're going to multiply all of this and turn it into something. So those will be 3 separate numerators. Now what I'm going to suggest doing here, to make it a little bit easier for the multiplying, is to recognize that this whole x minus 2, x plus 2, is actually x squared minus 4, because remember we factored that from the second equation right here. So instead of having to multiply a whole bunch of times, we can just multiply just that one time. So if I multiply x squared minus 4 times 4, which is this multiplication, that's going to give us 4x squared minus 16 for our first numerator. Okay. Then we're going to do our second multiplication. So what I'm going to do right now is I am going to take this minus sign right there, and I'm going to write that down. So there's that minus sign right there. Okay. And now we're going to do our multiplication of x times x plus 5. And that was our second numerator. And that's going to turn in to x squared plus 5x, sort of minus all of that. So you got to keep that in parentheses because of that minus sign right there. Then we have a plus sign. And now we're going to need to multiply our 4 times x minus 2 from our third numerator. And that's going to give us 4x squared minus 8x. Now remember, these are all just the numerators. Okay, all of this stuff is just the numerators, just numerators. All right, we're not going to worry about the denominators yet. So the next thing we want to do is we're going to distribute this negative sign right here. We're going to distribute that. So now we've got 4x squared minus 16 minus x squared minus 5x plus 4x squared minus 8x. Then we're going to combine our like terms. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get all my x squareds and I'm going to put them together. And I'm going to get a 7x squared from those. Okay. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do this in standard form. So I'm just going to go straight for my x's because that's what should come next. And I've got a negative 13x. And then the last thing I'm looking for is just my plain number. There's that minus 16. So that's my entire numerator. Now I can write my denominator. Okay, because my denominator is going to be real easy. Because my denominator is just all of that right there. That's my denominator. So it's going to be x plus 2 times x minus 2. And you can rewrite this so it looks a little bit nicer. In fact, you might not want that x right there. You might want your x minus 2 there, and then your x out in the front of that. Let's make our fraction bar a little smaller. There we go. And then the last thing we want to do is we want to try and factor this. Now our denominator is already factored, so we just want to take a look at our numerator and decide if we can factor that. So you can try and do the box because our leading coefficient is greater than 1, or you can, to see if it's even factorable, what you might want to do is plug it into the quadratic formula real quick and see if you get a whole number. If you get a whole number, then it's factorable, but if you don't get whole numbers, then it's not going to be factorable. Or rather, what I should say, it's not about if they're whole numbers, but if they're rational numbers, then you know it's factorable. But if they're not rational, then it's going to be not factorable. And so if we plug this into the quadratic formula, we'll come up with unrational numbers, which means that we cannot factor this. Which means that this answer right here is going to be our final answer. So there's basically 4 steps here. The first one, to get common denominators, and that's what we did here. First step. Then you need to deal with your numerators, and that's what we did right here. Dealt with our numerators, we multiplied them out, and we combined those like terms. Then do your third step. You write your denominator down. And then so we did that right here. And then factor if possible. In which case we couldn't factor ours, and so we finished.